Hello and welcome to another episode of the Frankly Leader podcast. Today I'm very excited. In an extra episode, a bonus episode in fact, the lovely Deborah Ogden is here, a gorgeous human being, a really good friend of mine, I'm proud to say. But she is also a Small Business of the Year award winner at the Yorkshire Business Woman Awards. Founder and MD of Deborah Ogden Limited, and she works globally with individuals and organisations, specialising in personal brand and impact expert. Deborah, I'm giddy with excitement and I'm nervous about doing this interview because I'm so giddy.
Oh, well, it's just, I know we've been chatting beforehand, but it's wonderful to chat. I mean, we're both so passionate about, leadership with heart and it's just exciting to be able to be on the podcast. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for coming. Let's dive straight in. So for anyone, if it is even possible out there for anyone to not know you, the famous award winner that you now are, for those people that are out there at the moment that don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about you and the work that you do and what you love about it.
Thank you. Well, I work with people on their visibility and their confidence. It was funny, I was talking to somebody a couple of weeks ago who said, Deborah, you don't sell personal brand, you sell confidence. And I thought it was quite a nice way of putting it. So I work with people on their personal brand and their impact, on their presentation skills. But virtually everybody who crosses my path is looking for more confidence in some way or another, whether that's to be more visible, whether it's their leadership brand, so they've been promoted, whether they want to be promoted, whether they're thinking about their leadership legacy and the impact they're having on the team. It may be presentation skills, it may be career development, but then I also work with a number of people who are business owners. So knowing that they need to be visible, but not knowing where to start. And I trained as a lawyer many years ago and then just discovered a love of marketing and communications, and worked for many years at Old Trafford Cricket Ground with people like Freddie Flintoff and Jimmy Anderson. And I really took all those skills and thought, what is it that I support the players with when they're on sponsorship deals, in their media training? What is it that I do? And I sort of packaged that all together. And I can remember talking to you probably 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, when we first were introduced, and saying, what do I call this? Because nobody talked about personal brand in those days, did they? And I talked about impact, but I think personal brand can sometimes have a bad name, that it's content creation. As you know, mine's much more about that inner reflective work first, so that we know who we are and we know that we're sharing an authentic brand.
I was just going to say that. I was like, if she's not going to use the authentic word, I'm bringing it in. So I would say
Yeah.
that is like, that's half the battle with personal brand, is like the challenge for people feeling like they need to be somebody that they're not in order to seem to be succeeding. And actually, what I love about your work is you're like, get rid of all of that. Like, who are you? Like, and celebrate, like, bring more of that out and celebrate more of that. Get really comfortable in your own skin, because that's where true confidence comes from.
Oh, absolutely. And, it's been a journey for me as well, that word, along with the authenticity word.
Okay.
But I can remember having some photographs taken, and you know Paul Dodd,
Yeah.
but having some photographs taken because I was worried that people saw it as soft skills. I love Simon Sinek's version of human skills rather than soft skills. But I'm fair. I'm very warm, and I felt that people wouldn't take me seriously. And I had some photographs taken, and I looked like some severe head teacher. I had my hair cut very severe. And I remember Paul saying to me, Deborah, what is going on with these? And he said, it's your warmth that we love. That's what we connect with. And sometimes, I think the thing is that we can, once we know what our authentic self is, our true self, we can dial it up and we can dial it down. So make no mistake, if I'm presenting in front of a board of lawyers in London, I have to dial up my gravitas, but I still show up as me. And I think that's the bit that people struggle with.
Yes. Yeah. So let's dive in then. So this obviously is to support leaders,
Hmm.
and we're all about helping leaders to be the best versions of themselves and to have as great an impact as they can with minimum amount of stress. So when like dive us into this topic, so when you're thinking about the biggest challenge of our future and that you think leaders need to be prepared for, what comes to mind for you? What do you think some of those big challenges are?
Um, this will come as no surprise, but AI. The introduction of AI means that across the board, there are roles, there are jobs, things that will be done that are being taken over by AI. And I think there is a fear in leadership about AI. And what we need to do is embrace it and
Mm.
then focus on what we can be, who we can be as leaders. So, really leaning into those relationship building, empathy, and looking at those skills, those human skills that we've talked about that at the moment AI cannot take from us. And so for me, that's hugely important. We've still got the challenge of hybrid working, which, communication is an issue. And the other challenge is through so many people working from home, especially a younger generation coming through, that communicate by phone. So, I've got a 17-year-old, he communicates by Snapchat. So many of them cannot look you in the eye when you're having a conversation. So many young people coming through are uncomfortable having an in-person conversation. I'm seeing an increased amount of work around, can I come in and help with networking, because people aren't comfortable. So these are all things that I do think leaders, we need to face up to these challenges and these gaps in the workforce that are coming through. But as leaders, it's embracing these human skills. And whereas maybe they were a given before, understanding they're not a given and being a bit more curious and open-minded and seeing where we can support in those areas.
I love that. I think that whole thing of, in a world that's becoming more and more disconnected and fractured, how can we and leaders, what's the role and responsibility that they have to really encourage us to stay more connected and to
Yeah.
stay more engaged? And obviously engagement's a big challenge in organizations just generally.
That connection is absolutely key. Another thing I talk about a lot is being intentional with your leadership. So I think that comes back to connection a little bit as well, that lack of connection with self. So
Mm.
again, this is where the personal branding comes in, that if you know what you stand for, you know how you're showing up. So you have complete confidence. And I mean, quiet confidence
Yeah.
here, that
Yeah.
self-worth confidence, not the jazz hands.
Yeah.
And it's that quiet confidence to be able to deliver, to be able to lead, to be able to encourage, to be able to connect, to be able to build confidence in your teams and to show up as well. So that personal growth as well. But that connection, it's looking for opportunities to connect and being intentional in looking for those opportunities. I think sometimes people don't join the dots. They know that the connection is needed, but they'll be thinking something, but they don't necessarily articulate it. We all think everybody's a mind reader, don't we?
Yeah.
So we're not articulating the challenges, and therefore sometimes I think we need to slow it down and think, what is my leadership brand? What do I want people to say about me? What legacy do I want to leave? How do I want to bring this team through? And then show up in that way. We need to execute our behaviors in that way to ensure that we're communicating that.
Love that. And something you said a little while ago made me, like, really resonated with me about that the clarity that you get when someone's clear who they are, what they stand for, that, and they're not kind of going, oh, I need to perform, so I've got to be extrovert here to fit in, and I'm doing the jazz hands already. And like for me, I like to use the term resonance. When
Mm,
someone is comfortable inside, they know what they stand for, the boundaries are clear enough. When they communicate, there's a resonance about the clarity, like the vibration of their message, almost in terms of how it lands, that people are like, oh, right, okay, yeah, I get that.
yeah. It's
But
that
it doesn't,
congruence, isn't it?
yeah, 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 I love that. So what we're asking in these 4 bonus episodes is to tell us one thing. Like, and I know there's lots of things in here already, but to distill it down into, leaders are busy, they're largely overwhelmed, there's a lot of loneliness in that community at the moment. They're trying to figure out a lot and get the job done. So what's the tool that you think leaders need to have in their rucksack that you think will make the biggest difference to them, given all of that?
Okay, not much there. So for that clarity, I think it comes back to self-awareness. And the big thing in my work is being aware and understanding that, the brand that you think you're communicating in your head is actually irrelevant. And so getting that feedback from, and most leaders, I think these days, depending on the size of organization, but many leaders will get 360 feedback and will know exactly how they're impacting. But I would be tuning into that on a more regular basis. So finding out how you're impacting on people, because unless we do that assessment, unless we have that awareness, then we're not able to adapt our behaviors and ensure that we're communicating the messages that we want to communicate. I love that about resonance. I think that is incredibly important. So if you have that clarity, show up as yourself. I know I'm going on to a second thing here, but have that clarity, know what your values are, know what you stand for. And yes, it allows you to, have that North Star, keep going, but it also allows you to say no to things. So it helps you with those boundaries as well.
Yeah, I love that. And the first priority in my Frankly Leader framework is self-awareness. So like the what you're talking about here is that, like, really understanding yourself. Who are you? And I think so often in leadership, the focus is on the other. What do I need to do to the other or to the team or for the business? Rather than go, like, first start with me. Like, what do I know about me? How am I showing up? What do I need?
Yeah.
How do I resource myself? What impact am I having on other people?
Yeah.
It's easier to change this than it is to change everything that's out
Absolutely.
there.
We've all heard they be the change,
You want to
but
be, yeah,
absolutely. But it's that self-leadership. And quite often I start working with people and I'm saying, what's your morning routine? How do you show up in a morning? Are you showing up at your best? What are your outcomes? What you're trying to achieve? And it's setting yourself up so that you can perform to your best and be intentional in the way rather than just reacting, so you can proactively lead, whether it's leading yourself, leading a project, leading a team.
yeah. And so, for a leader who starts to embrace some of this, what are those challenges that you think can be overcome by being more self-aware and being more authentic?
Well, I think we get stuck in the weeds, don't we? We get stuck in the weeds and we forget what's important. And, one of my favorite quotes is the Chinese proverb of when's the best time to plant an oak tree? It's 20 years ago. The
Yeah.
second best time is now. And I do feel that a lot of the work that you and I talk about gets put to the bottom of the priorities list.
Mm.
And actually, it's about doing something about it and doing something about it now and allowing it to grow. And there's no overnight success. Again, we had this conversation the other day. There is so much instant instant gratification.
Patient.
I was going to say instant gratitude. There's not instant
The
gratitude.
opposite.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just taking that time to evolve. But this isn't a quick fix, but you need to get to know yourself. And yes, there are frustrations. But and sometimes some of the feedback is hard, but I call that the gold dust, because once you've got that feedback, you can do something about it.
Yeah, yes. We advocate for honesty. Yeah, you can't do anything about what you don't know.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's that's what I would say about awareness. And also, I think sometimes when people start to be visible, start to push themselves forward, find their voice, then they'll get some dissenters. And
Yes.
it's
Yes.
it's realizing that and
Oh,
being
yeah.
ready for that and
Yes.
knowing that that's not about you, that's about their insecurities.
Yes. Yes. On a personal and professional level, I've had quite a lot of that to face into in the last couple of years. That the more space I've found to show up as me, and the more clear I've been about my own resonance, it's it's kind of ruffled the feathers of relationships and the bubbles that have surfaced as a result of that, and having to sit with the discomfort of, oh, I might not be liked as much over by being me. But what's the trade-off here? Do I spend my life being a people pleaser or a recovering people pleaser and fitting in with what everybody else wants me to be? Or do I create as much space as I can for me and let everyone else get on with being them?
Yeah, I
Really
love
hard
that.
journey.
And yeah, I love that. And, it's a challenge that I have. And just something that you've said there has prompted me to think of something else is the perfectionism issue.
Yeah.
And, I openly say I've had counselling for perfectionism. It was holding me back. And I've had to learn that done is better than perfect and all that. But what is perfect when it comes to leadership? And it's about, I honestly believe if I have the integrity to show up as my best in that moment, then that's the best that I can do. And I think it's, I'm not always comfortable with that, but I was listening to Elle Macpherson yesterday on a podcast, and I just came across it by chance, and she was saying that she said she's managed to get herself to a place where she knows that when she looks back, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a presentation, that in that moment she was doing the best she could. And I thought what a powerful lesson. Yes, we can look back, and yes, we can be self-critical, but actually we did show up and we delivered our message. And if we've got that resonance that you talk about, then actually
It's the best that you can do, because the world is messy at the minute, isn't it? The world is very unpredictable, incomprehensible, imperfect, and constantly changing. So, like for me, I feel the stress of even thinking about trying to pursue perfection in this crazy world at the moment.
and people spot, yeah, well, they spot, that perfection is an issue. But I think when we're trying to be perfect, that goes back to the piece you said about the performance.
Mm.
Once somebody starts to perform, then people pick up on that vibe, that inner authenticness, and it's exhausting as well. That energy can be so better put elsewhere, focused elsewhere. So, um, I think it's accepting that we're not perfect, and we've always, I'm a huge believer. Of course, I'm in a growth mindset. I'm learning every day. I'm taking resonance away from this podcast. I love that, and we can always get better, can't we? So we're never going to be perfect.
No, we're not. So let's ditch perfect officially. You're banned. So, top tips. So, if you were to give one tip to leaders listening on this topic, what would it be? Or two? You can have two.
Two. So it
Mm.
would be work on your values, get that clarity.
Mm.
Absolutely. Know who you are so that you are able to show up, because that is the foundation of absolutely everything else. But as part of that, get the feedback. So know
Mm.
where you are at the moment, and then you can decide whether you like where you are at the moment, or you can start to work on those areas. And that takes courage. That takes it takes that that inner reflection. I think that what I find, and I'd really be interested to know about your own work, Jen, is that people come to me and they want the tactics.
Mm.
They want to know what I should be being visible, where should I be being visible, what strategy should I put together, and they don't like doing that inner reflection. But actually that is where the foundation is. That's where I worked in the media as media manager in sport, as I said earlier, and we used to talk about in the week you would have your factual news, but the Sunday papers would add colour. And I always say this is the difference between the news and adding colour. And this is where you add your colour, your personality, not just what you do, but who you are and how you do it. And that's what people need to be defining.
Yeah. And my version of that, I'm the same. A lot of clients will say, and I think partly because they're overwhelmed, and I think there's a bit of a like the energy. I know I need to go there, wherever there is, but the energy of like even just lifting the lid and having a look, underneath, like, so give me the tools and the tips and the frameworks. And I think there's a space for that to help people feel resourced. But the thing I always say is you can do outside in growth or you can do inside out growth. And my sweet spot is the inside out stuff. And I know it is for you too. And it's like I can give you all I can fill your brain with tools and frameworks,
Mm.
models, tactics. But if you're not feeling resonance, alignment, healthy power internally, if you're not liking yourself, respecting yourself, if that stuff's not in, all those tools become pointless. Like the inside out is what makes those tools impactful. So you need both really, but I think for me it always starts with do the inside work first, because then you might need less tools in your tool.
Yeah, absolutely. And you use the tools in the right way.
Yes.
I think so many people, and I've been guilty of this, and is that they don't have the clarity of where they're going, what the outcome is, what they're looking towards. And I don't think there are sort of 10-year plans anymore. I think, the last 10 years has shown us that, hasn't it? Who knows what's out there? But if we have those small personal goals to work towards, then I'm a big believer in the sort of strategy of who will you become
Mm.
as you are working towards that goal. And I tend to talk about being rather than doing.
Yes. I was just thinking that my sentence is, who do I need to be?
Yeah,
Who do I
yeah,
need to be
yeah.
today?
Yeah. And I think that's where there's a great place for role models as well.
Mm.
People say, well, is it, fake it till I make it? No, it's about seeing somebody else and seeing it in action and seeing how other people are communicating, how other people are showing up. Thinking, I like the way they do that. So what can I take from that and make it my own? And it's about practicing it and making it your own. It's not about being false. It's about finding those parts of you and bringing those out. I always use people like Michelle Obama as a great example of somebody who has that gravitas, a fabulous lawyer who has impact, but she embraces her feminine side. She loves her fashion, the family. And, the two aren't mutually exclusive,
Yeah.
and she absolutely emulates that. So, I when I was younger, it used to be what would Beyonce do? Now it's, well, what would Michelle Obama do?
And I'm conscious we've not even talked about one of our shared heroes, Brené Brown. I was just thinking, oh,
Absolutely.
what would Brené do?
What would Brené do? And
What
I,
would
I think
Brené
that's
do?
something that, we've talked about many, many times, haven't we? But
Mm.
that vulnerability
Mm.
and yeah, I think the biggest challenge with vulnerability is people understanding what vulnerability is.
Yes, agree. Yeah. Yes. And that for me is where I always talk about vulnerability and courage are hand in hand. And really what we're saying is to be courageous, not brave, because that's a different thing, but to be
Yeah.
courageous, you have to get comfortable with that icky feeling, and that's your vulnerability. And for me, another one of my little sayings is, what's your edge? Like the
Mm,
edge is where you
mm,
find your vulnerability, but it's also where you find your courage. And that
yeah,
what's the step to better that will just take you beyond your edge, because that's where growth happens.
yeah.
There's a very masculine perception about being a leader and what it takes to be a leader, and I think like that's it's old, it's done and dusted, it's not working anymore. It doesn't resource us, our teams and our organizations well for the future that's coming. We need a much more human, relational, empathetic leader who, yes, can be strong, but strong in a kind of principled values, boundaries, psychological safety way,
Mm.
and also lean into some of those more tender aspects of leadership. So, how do we create psychological safety? How do we create permission for things to fail and learn so that we can try again and do better next time? It's that there's a fine balance for me.
Absolutely. And, having trained as a lawyer and working a lot in professional services, that expectation to be professional. Well, professional doesn't mean, and that this is true for any leader in corporate as well. Professional does not mean leave your personality behind. And I see many fathers, husbands, sons that walk into a working environment, and I think, what happened there? And get them outside of the working environment, and they're, back to themselves. And I think we need to embrace that. And I always, when I'm sort of first sharing about Brené's work, I always say, she works with the Navy SEALs,
Yes.
and she always says, when are you your most vulnerable? When you're being your most courageous. And I'm a big believer as well. I think there's I think the personal development world has a lot to answer for when
Mm.
it comes to confidence, because I think we're led to believe that once you've got confidence, then you've got it for life. And I think that inner confidence is a different thing, that self-worth. But confidence ebbs and flows depending on the situation. And I think sometimes we may not have the confidence, but it's about being courageous, and that's where the vulnerability and courageous comes in for me. So when people are worried about being visible, worried about finding their voice, sharing what they've got to say, being heard, showing up, all those things, then it's about being courageous. And then you find the evidence that, oh, actually, I am somebody who can do this. And that's what starts to build your confidence.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I could talk to you all day,
I
Deborah, and
know.
I'm not going to. I'm going to hit the pause here. Um, and just before my final comments, for people to reach out and get in touch with you, I know you've got some fantastic tools that people can tap into as well if they want to start building their own self-awareness and authenticity. Just tell us how we can get in touch with you, and I'll include the links as well in the bottom of the podcast.
Thank you. Well, my website is deborahogden.com, so that's easy.
Mhm.
I have a weekly podcast on a Monday morning called More Impact. Talk about vulnerability. That is me being vulnerable. I have very clear boundaries about what I share, but the podcast is the place where I share what I'm thinking about that week and share tools and techniques. And just on the back of the vulnerability piece, I've nearly pulled it a number of times, but there are people that get in touch that say, oh my goodness, you hit a chord that week. Please, please keep going. So I keep showing up. So that's More Impact, which is on Spotify and Apple and on my website. And then really exciting, I've recently developed an online personal brand masterclass. And I keep saying to people, it's not lesser, it's just, it's not me in person. And that is video, interactive, some AI in there. We're embracing the AI, but that takes people from A to their, you know, from zero to their full personal brand, a full visibility strategy. And I've worked with, you know, the best people to bring that to life. So that platform is amazing and is at a price. I always want to have an entry price that anybody can work with me. So that's available as well on my website.
Fantastic. Well, I think everybody should have a Deborah Ogden in their life, and you bring many gifts to my life, for which I am super grateful. But the one that stands out the most is that just being with you, the permission that you unconsciously give me to be more of myself is such a powerful gift. And I think the more people can do that for others, the better the world will be. So thank you, not just for coming on my podcast, but for what you bring into my life.
Oh, thanks, Jen. That
Mm.
means the world. Thank you.
No, thank you.